The Veltharan ambassador's three-chambered heart nearly stopped when Captain Corvin Draex stepped out of the transport pod without his gravity compensator. The alien diplomat watched in fascination and horror as the human moved with fluid precision. Across the station's deck plating, each footstep creating subtle vibrations that resonated through the superstructure. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Nethquil, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking nervously. "The gravitational field here is 12 times standard galactic norm." Draex smiled, the expression somehow predatory despite its apparent warmth. "Standard? For whom?" He gestured to the viewport, where Earth hung like a blue-white marble against the void. "My people evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. 9.8 meters per second squared taught us to be strong before we learned to think." The Veltharan delegation had come to assess humanity's worthiness for inclusion in the Galactic Concordat. What they found defied every biological principle they understood. Humans weren't just surviving in high-gravity environments. They were thriving, building, creating weapons of war that could crack moons. Lieutenant Commander Zara Vex 9 entered the observation deck, her augmented frame moving with mechanical precision. Half her body had been replaced with military-grade cybernetics after the Proxima campaign, yet she carried herself with the same lethal grace as her fully organic captain. "Sir, the hegemony scouts have entered the outer system. 3 dreadnoughts, configuration unknown." "The Zarion hegemony?" Nethquil's voice trembled. "But they've never ventured this far into contested space. Their ships are designed for low-gravity species. They couldn't possibly operate in Sol's gravity well," Draex finished. "No, they can't. But they don't need to land to glass a planet." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal all Earth defense platforms. Condition red. And get me Admiral Caney 7 on priority channel." The holographic display materialized, showing a woman whose scarred face spoke of battles fought in the crushing depths of gas-giant atmospheres. Admiral Isara Caney 7 had been born on a mining station orbiting Jupiter, where the tidal forces would have liquefied any other species' bones. "The Zarians think they're dealing with another soft-world species," she said without preamble. "They have no idea what we've become." Through the viewport, sleek human warships began emerging from concealment behind asteroids and planetary shields. Each vessel was a testament to Earth's brutal forge. Hulls designed to withstand crushing acceleration, weapons systems that could function in environments where other species' technology would simply collapse under its own weight. The lead Zarion. Dreadnought was 15 kilometers long, its biomechanical hull pulsing with bioluminescent threat displays. It had conquered 47 systems, each victory adding to the hegemony's reputation for unstoppable expansion. "They've never fought anyone like us," Draex murmured, watching the alien formation advance. "Born on a world that demanded strength, shaped by gravity that would have crushed weaker species in their cradles." Ambassador Nethquil watched the human fleet deploy with growing amazement. These weren't the desperate survivors he'd expected to find on this backwater world. These were apex predators who had turned their planetary prison into a training ground for galactic conquest. The first Zarian energy lance struck Earth's outermost defense platform, expecting to see it vaporize like so many colonial outposts before it. Instead, the human structure absorbed the impact, its gravity-forged hull radiating heat but holding firm. "Welcome to humanity's neighborhood," Draex said softly. "Population, too stubborn to die." The war for Earth's right to exist was about to begin, and the galaxy was wholly unprepared for what humans could accomplish when their backs were against the wall. The Zarion hegemony's war prime Gulthak had evolved in the methane swamps of Kepler 442b, where the gravity was so gentle that his species had developed hollow bones and gossamer-thin flesh. Standing 3 meters tall but weighing less than a human child, he commanded his dreadnought from a suspension field that kept his fragile frame from collapsing under even minimal acceleration. Curious, he mused, watching the human defense. Platforms weather bombardment that should have reduced them to cosmic dust. Perhaps their metallurgy is more advanced than intelligence suggested. His tactical officer, a being of pure energy housed in a crystalline matrix, pulsed with uncertainty. War Prime, their ships are moving in formation patterns that suggest they intend to engage at close range. This defies all tactical doctrine for void combat. Gulthak's 4 eyes dilated in what passed for amusement among his kind. Let them come. No species has ever survived direct contact with our molecular disruptors. Their primitive chemical rockets cannot possibly match our biothrust systems. He could not have been more wrong. The first wave of human fighters screamed past his flagship at velocities that would have liquefied the crew of any other vessel. Inside each cockpit, pilots endured G-forces that registered as impossible on Zerion sensors. Major Kalen Vorthak pulled nearly 30 gravities in a spiraling attack run, his body pressed against his command seat like a human-shaped anvil. Phoenix. Squadron. This is your reminder that pain is just weakness leaving the body, he transmitted through gritted teeth. His neural implants flooded his system with combat stimulants. But it was pure human stubbornness that kept him conscious, as his fighter carved through the Zerion formation like a guided missile. The aliens' molecular disruptors fired, sending waves of destructive energy that should have unraveled the chemical bonds holding the human ships together. Instead, the fighters' hulls, forged in the heart of Jupiter's crushing depths, absorbed the energy and radiated it away as heat. What manner of creatures are these? Gulthak's voice carried the first note of genuine fear as human plasma torpedoes began impacting his dreadnought's biohull. The weapons weren't just destructive, they were designed to function in environments where conventional explosives would fail, their fusion cores maintaining coherence under pressures that would collapse. Stars. Admiral Caney Seven's voice cut through the comm channels with the authority of someone who had wrestled gas giants into submission. All ships, execute Earthbreaker Protocol. Show them what happens when you threaten the homeworld of a species that survived the Permian extinction. The human fleet began a maneuver that violated every principle of safe void combat. They accelerated directly toward the Zerion dreadnoughts, their crews enduring acceleration that would have killed any other species' warriors in seconds. But humans weren't just any species. They were the children of a world that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill them. Captain Draex watched from the command deck as his ship, the Terran Defiance, closed to weapons range. The hull groaned under the stress of 18 gravities of acceleration, but held. Around him, his crew functioned with the mechanical precision of beings who had been forged in pressure that would crush diamonds. Target their primary weapon. Clusters, he ordered. And remember, they're used to fighting species that break when you apply pressure. They have no idea what we're made of. The Zerion War Prime's second dreadnought began to collapse, its biomechanical hull unable to withstand the sustained barrage of human weapons. As it died, Gulthak finally understood the magnitude of his error. "Recall all ships," he commanded, his voice hollow with the realization that his species had just encountered something unprecedented in their 1,000-year history of conquest. "We are not equipped for this manner of warfare." But it was too late. The humans had tasted first blood, and they were done playing defense. 6 months after the failed Zerion assault on Sol, the Galactic Concordat's emergency session convened in the crystal spires of Altair Prime. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the low-gravity amphitheater, their delicate forms requiring environmental suits just to survive the meeting. "The humans have violated the covenant of controlled expansion," declared Praetor Velthak of the Centaurian Union, his tentacles writhing with indignation. "They've established colonies in 12 contested systems without authorization. Ambassador..." Nethkul, who had witnessed humanity's first military demonstration, remained silent. He had seen what these beings could do when cornered. and he suspected the galaxy was about to learn a terrible lesson about the difference between civilization and survival. Deep in the Kepler 186 system, Colonel Darien Vex 7 supervised the construction of humanity's first true military colony. The world designated as Ironhold was a nightmare of crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere, completely uninhabitable to any known species. To humans, it was paradise, a world where they could build without restraint, where their children could grow up in an environment that would forge them into living weapons. "Status report," Darien commanded, his voice carrying easily across the construction site, despite the howling winds that would have shredded any other species' vocal cords. "Orbital shipyards are at 60% completion, sir," reported Lieutenant Kira Nexus Prime, her cybernetic implants glowing against the planet's perpetual twilight. "The heavy gravity forges are already producing hull plates that test at twice the density of standard human military armor." Darien nodded, watching automated systems assemble the massive space elevators that would connect Ironhold's surface to the orbital construction facilities. Each elevator cable was woven from materials that had been compressed under pressures that would liquefy conventional matter, creating structures that were essentially indestructible by galactic standards. "And the population transfer? 17 million volunteers have already made planetfall, sir. Applications for residency are outpacing our processing capacity by 3 to 1. Darien wasn't surprised. Humans had always been drawn to harsh environments, and Ironhold represented something unprecedented, a chance to build a civilization without the constraints imposed by weaker species. Here, human engineers could design cities that would function under any conceivable conditions, could create technologies that would be impossible in low-gravity environments. The comm system crackled to life, carrying Admiral Caney 7's voice from the Fleet Command Center in orbit. "Colonel, we're receiving reports from our deep space reconnaissance platforms. The hegemony is mobilizing a response fleet. Estimate 150 vessels, including their new bio-titans." "Understood," Darien replied. "How long until they reach our position?" 6 weeks, assuming they maintain standard patrol velocities." Darien smiled, an expression that would have terrified any alien observer. "Then we have time to prepare a proper welcome." Across the galaxy, humanity's expansion had taken on a momentum that bordered on the inevitable. Not because they were conquering, but because they were settling worlds that no other species could even approach. The crushing gravity wells that had kept entire star systems uninhabitable for millennia were becoming the foundation of a new kind of civilization. On Titan 7, a world where the atmospheric pressure would have liquefied conventional metals, human miners extracted resources that had been considered impossible to reach. Their equipment functioned under conditions that would have destroyed any other species' technology, and their cities were built to withstand environmental forces that registered as natural disasters on galactic scales. The Concordate's response was swift and predictable. Economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and finally, military intervention. But they had made the same mistake as the Zerion hegemony. They assumed that humans could be defeated through conventional means. "They don't understand," Admiral Caney 7 observed, reviewing the tactical assessments from her command center. "They think we're just another species that got lucky with primitive technology. They have no idea that we're not fighting for territory or resources." "What are we fighting for?" asked Captain Drax, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many battles. The Admiral's scarred face reflected in the viewport, where human ships moved in formations that defied every principle of safe void combat. "Survival. The right to exist as we are instead of what they want us to be." The galaxy was about to learn that there was no force in the universe more dangerous than a species that refused to compromise its nature for the sake of peace. The Concordates, grand fleet assembled in the Vega system, a sight that had never before been witnessed in galactic history. 200 vessels from 17 different species, each ship representing the pinnacle of their civilization's military technology. The combined firepower could have sterilized entire star systems, and their commanders believed they were bringing overwhelming force to bear against a primitive species that had gotten lucky. Fleet Admiral Morthak of the Rigelian Compact commanded from the flagship Cosmic Harmony, a vessel so massive that its gravity well affected nearby asteroids. His species had evolved in the gentle embrace of a red dwarf's habitable zone, where conflict was solved through meditation and careful resource allocation. "The humans have fortified 7 systems," reported his tactical coordinator, a being of crystallized thought patterns. "Intelligence suggests they have approximately 40 vessels of military classification. 40 against 200, Morthak mused, his translucent form pulsing with what passed for confidence among his kind. Perhaps they will see reason and surrender before unnecessary violence occurs. He transmitted the standard demand for unconditional surrender on all human communication frequencies, confident that any rational species would recognize the futility of resistance. The response came from Admiral Caney 7 herself, broadcast from her command ship deep in the Kepler 186 system. "This is Admiral Isara Caney 7 of the Terran Defense Force. Your fleet is hereby ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. You have 30 minutes to comply." The alien commanders exchanged what passed for amused communications among their species. 30 minutes? The humans were demanding that the most powerful military force in galactic history retreat from a handful of backwater worlds? "They must be suffering from some form of collective madness," suggested War Coordinator Zelthak of the Andromedan Collective. "Perhaps exposure to their high-gravity environment has damaged their cognitive functions." Admiral Morthak was about to respond when his sensors detected something that shouldn't have been possible. Human ships were emerging from concealment throughout the system, not 40 vessels, but nearly 300, including massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Concordate's largest ships. "How?" whispered his tactical coordinator. "Their industrial capacity couldn't possibly support this level of military production." The answer became clear as the human fleet deployed in combat formation. These weren't conventional warships built in orbital facilities. They were mobile fortresses constructed in the crushing depths of gas-giant atmospheres, their hulls forged under pressures that would collapse ordinary matter into exotic states. General Talon Vex Prime commanded the human. Response from the bridge of Earthshaker, a vessel that had been assembled in the metallic hydrogen seas of Saturn. The ship's armor was literally denser than neutron star material, and its weapon systems functioned on principles that the Concordate's scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. "All ships, execute the gravity hammer," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally overseen the construction of humanity's war machine. "Show them what we learned from 4 billion years of planetary violence." The human fleet began an acceleration pattern that violated every principle of safe void combat. Their ships moved like guided missiles, pulling G-forces that would have liquefied any other species' crews. But inside each vessel, human warriors endured the crushing acceleration with the same stubborn determination that had allowed their ancestors to survive ice ages, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions. The Concordate's bioships fired first, unleashing energy weapons that could unmake matter at the molecular level. The beams struck human hulls and dissipated, absorbed by armor that had been forged in pressures that approached the core of gas giants. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Morthak as his sensors registered the human fleet's approach velocities. "They're pulling nearly 50 gravities of acceleration. Nothing organic can survive that level of stress." But humans weren't just organic. They were the evolutionary product of a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. Their bodies had been shaped by gravity, their minds forged by constant struggle, their technology designed to function in environments that would destroy conventional matter. The first human plasma torpedo struck the Concordate flagship's biohull, and Admiral Morthak finally understood the magnitude of his civilization's error. The weapon didn't just destroy, it consumed, feeding on the exotic matter that composed his ship's structure. "All ships, emergency retreat," he commanded, his voice hollow with the realization that the Concordat had just encountered something unprecedented in galactic history. "We are not equipped for this manner of warfare." But the humans weren't finished. They had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, and they intended to deliver a message that would resonate throughout the galaxy. The battle for the Vega system lasted exactly 14 minutes. When the quantum smoke cleared, 73 Concordat vessels drifted as expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The survivors fled in formations that spoke of complete tactical breakdown, their crews traumatized by warfare that defied every principle they understood. Admiral Morthak's flagship limped toward the system's edge, its biohull scarred by weapons that seemed to feed on the exotic matter that composed Concordat technology. His tactical coordinator flickered between states of crystallized panic, unable to process what they had witnessed. "Compile a full tactical analysis," Morthak ordered, his translucent form dimmed by something approaching despair. "The High Council must understand what we're dealing with." The report that reached the Concordat's inner chambers 3 days later shattered 40,000 years of galactic orthodoxy. The humans weren't just another species that had developed advanced technology. They were living weapons, shaped by evolutionary pressures that had no equivalent in the civilized galaxy. "They don't fight like us," reported Fleet Medical Coordinator Yeltharak, his multi-chambered brain struggling to process the biological scans taken during the battle. "Their warriors maintained consciousness under acceleration that should have liquefied their neural tissue. Their ship's hulls are constructed from materials that exist in stable form only under pressures approaching stellar core conditions." High Counselor Velkorian, whose species had ruled the galaxy's oldest civilization for 30 millennia, listened to the reports with growing horror. "Are you suggesting that these humans are naturally suited for warfare?" "Not just suited for it," Yeltharak replied. "They've been forged by it. Their entire evolutionary history is a catalog of extinction events, environmental catastrophes, and planetary-scale violence. They didn't develop civilization despite their world's hostility. They developed it because of it." Meanwhile, in the depths of human space, the aftermath of victory was bringing its own revelations. Admiral Caney 7 stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Forge Station, watching automated systems process the wreckage of Concordat vessels. The alien technology was being reverse-engineered not for replication, but for improvement. "Their hulls are elegant," observed Chief Engineer Vex Delta, her cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the analysis systems. "But they're designed for species that evolved in gentle environments. They never had to solve the engineering problems we take for granted." Dr. Meridian Cross 7, the expedition's xenobiologist, held up a fragment of Concordat bioarmor. This material would be considered impossible by their standards, self-repairing, adaptive, integrated with their ship's life support systems. But look at this. She applied pressure with a standard human tool, and the supposedly indestructible material crumbled. It can't withstand even minimal compression force. They've never had to build anything that could survive in a high-gravity environment. Admiral Caney 7 nodded slowly, understanding the implications. "They're not weaker than us. They're specialized for different conditions, and those conditions never prepared them for warfare against a species like ours." The realization was spreading through both human and alien communities. The Concordat's member species had evolved on worlds that were, by galactic standards, gentle. Low gravity, stable climates, abundant resources. They had developed wisdom, philosophy, art, and science, but they had never learned to fight for survival against a universe that wanted them dead. Humans had learned nothing else. Captain Dreyex's voice crackled over the comm system from the forward reconnaissance fleet. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from 18 different systems. colonial governments requesting immediate protection from human expansion. Protection? Admiral Caney Seven's scarred face showed genuine surprise. We haven't attacked any colonial settlements. No, ma'am. But our expansion into high-gravity systems is apparently causing panic throughout the local galactic community. They're interpreting our colonization efforts as preparation for conquest. The Admiral considered this, watching human construction crews work in vacuum without pressure suits, their augmented physiology allowing them to function in environments that would kill any other known species within seconds. Maybe they're right to be afraid, she murmured. Not because we want to conquer them, but because we've proven that their entire understanding of galactic power was built on false assumptions. Dr. Cross-7 looked up from her analysis. Admiral, I'm detecting something else in these debris samples. Genetic markers suggesting that several concordate species have been artificially modified to enhance their pacifist tendencies. Modified how? Selective breeding programs, genetic therapy, neural conditioning. It appears that for the last several thousand years, the concordate has been actively removing aggressive traits from their member species. Admiral Caney 7 felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. They've been breeding themselves into weakness, creating a galaxy of beings who are fundamentally incapable of effective warfare. Which means, Dr. Cross-7 concluded, that we're not just different from them. We're their evolutionary opposite. 2 years after the Vega incident, as historians would later call it, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The Concordate's central authority had collapsed, replaced by a loose confederation of species who spent more time requesting human protection than challenging human expansion. Ambassador Nethkul stood in the human embassy on New Geneva Station, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the harsh lighting that humans preferred. The meeting chamber was deliberately maintained at 2 gravities, not enough to harm visiting aliens, but sufficient to remind them of humanity's fundamental nature. The proposal is straightforward, explained Director Lyra Vex Alpha, humanity's first interstellar diplomat. Her augmented frame showed the scars of 3 major battles, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had personally negotiated with species that commanded world-killing technologies. We establish protectorates, not colonies. Your people maintain complete autonomy over internal affairs? And in exchange, Nethkul asked, though he already knew the answer. We handle external threats. Any species or organization that threatens protectorate worlds deals with the Terran Defense Force. The terms were simultaneously generous and terrifying. Humans were offering to guarantee the security of any species that accepted their protection, but the galaxy had learned what human protection looked like. Entire star systems rendered uninhabitable to hostile forces, defensive networks that could withstand stellar-level bombardment, and military responses that redefine the meaning of overwhelming force. There are concerns, Nethkul admitted. Your expansion into high-gravity systems has created disturbances in the local space-time metrics. Some of our scientists believe you're developing technologies that could threaten the fundamental structure of reality. Director Vex Alpha's smile was reassuring and predatory in equal measure. We're developing technologies that work in environments where conventional physics breaks down. That's not the same as threatening reality. It's expanding our understanding of what reality can include. She gestured to the viewport, where human engineering projects were visible across the system. Orbital habitats that functioned in the crushing tidal forces near neutron stars. Mining operations that extracted energy directly from black hole accretion disks, and construction projects that assembled materials under pressures that created exotic forms of matter. Your people evolved in environments that were stable, predictable, safe, she continued. You developed remarkable civilizations based on harmony and cooperation, but you never learned to thrive in chaos. And you did? We didn't have a choice. Every major extinction event in our planet's history was an intelligence test, and failure meant death. We learned to adapt, to survive, to turn hostile environments into advantages. On Ironhold, General Talon Vex Prime supervised the construction of humanity's first stellar engineering project. The massive installation would harness the gravitational energy of a nearby pulsar, converting it into power that could supply entire galactic civilizations. The engineering challenges were staggering. Materials that could withstand gravitational fields that warped space-time, containment systems that functioned in environments where conventional matter became plasma. To humans, it was simply another problem to solve. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying easily across the construction site despite the reality-distorting forces that surrounded the project. "Primary containment field is stable at 97% efficiency," reported Chief Engineer Kaylee Nexus 9, her cybernetic implants glowing against the pulsar's impossible radiance. "We're generating enough power to supply 47 star systems at current galactic consumption rates. And the diplomatic situation? 17 species have formally requested admission to the Terran Protectorate. The Veltharan Council is offering us exclusive mining rights to their homeworld's moon in exchange for defensive guarantees." General Vex Prime nodded, understanding the implications. The galaxy's species were beginning to realize that humanity's expansion wasn't conquest, it was evolution. A fundamental change in what galactic civilization could become when it was, no longer limited by the environmental constraints that had shaped the old Concordat. "They're afraid of us," observed Engineer Nexus 9. "Of course they are," the general replied. "We represent everything they bred out of themselves over the last 10,000 years. The capacity for violence, the ability to thrive in hostile environments, the willingness to take risks that could reshape reality itself." "Are we the villains in this story?" General Vex Prime considered the question, watching human workers construct installations that would have been considered impossible by galactic science just 3 years earlier. "I don't think there are villains here, just different definitions of what civilization should look like." The galaxy was learning to live with beings who had been forged by forces that would have destroyed any other species, and slowly, carefully, they were discovering that human protection came with unexpected benefits. 25 years after first contact, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the civilization that had once dismissed humanity as a primitive backwater species. The transformation hadn't come through conquest or subjugation, but through the inexorable logic of survival. Emperor Admiral Darian Vex 7 stood on the observation deck of the World Breaker, humanity's first galaxy-class starship. The vessel, stretched for 50 kilometers, its hull forged in the crushing depths of a collapsed star and powered by controlled singularities that would have been considered fantasy by the old Concordat. Below him, the planet Harmony Prime, once the capital of galactic civilization, had been transformed into something unprecedented. The world's gentle gravity had been artificially enhanced through gravitational manipulation technology, creating zones where human and alien architects could collaborate on projects that defied conventional understanding. Cities now rose from the planet's surface like crystalline mountains, their structures incorporating both human engineering principles and alien aesthetic sensibilities. Beings who had once fled from human expansion now competed for the opportunity to study in human universities, to work on human engineering projects, to contribute to the civilization that had emerged from the synthesis of galactic wisdom and terrestrial stubbornness. "Status report," Darian commanded, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had personally overseen humanity's rise from planetary prisoners to galactic shepherds. "Integration proceeding ahead of schedule, across all sectors," reported Admiral Kira Nexus Prime, her augmented frame interfacing directly with the ship's consciousness. "The Veltharan technical colleges are producing engineers who can work in high-gravity environments. The Xerion Biotech Cooperative has developed new medical techniques based on human physiology studies. And resistance, minimal." The Outer Rim Coalition attempted to establish an independent defense network last month. but abandoned the project when they realized they couldn't produce weapons capable of penetrating our basic shields. Darien nodded, understanding the implications. It wasn't that humans had become conquerors, it was that they had become indispensable. In a galaxy where hostile forces from extragalactic space were beginning to probe the outer systems, only human technology could provide effective defense. Dr. Meridian Cross 7 materialized as a holographic projection, her consciousness uploaded to the ship's quantum matrix after her biological form had been destroyed in the defense of Altair. Prime. Death for humans had become merely another engineering problem to solve. Emperor Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from deep space monitoring stations. The Void Devourers have begun their incursion into the Andromeda approach vector. Estimated arrival at the Galactic Rim. 18 months. The Void Devourers represented humanity's first encounter with beings who had evolved under conditions even more hostile than Earth. Extragalactic entities that consumed the fundamental forces holding matter together, they had already destroyed 17 galaxy clusters and were apparently drawn to regions of high technological development. Defensive preparations complete. Every inhabited system now has human-designed shields capable of withstanding reality disruption weapons. The stellar engineering projects can be converted to weapon systems if necessary. Darien considered this, watching the construction crews that worked in perfect harmony. Human heavy world specialists working alongside alien technical experts whose species had once considered humans too dangerous to contact. Have we become what the galaxy needs us to be? He asked. Dr. Cross 7's projection smiled, an expression that carried the warmth of someone who had witnessed the transformation of an entire galactic civilization. We've become what we always were. The difference is that now the galaxy understands what that means. On worlds throughout human space, children played in gravitational fields that would have crushed their grandparents, learned to solve engineering, problems in environments that redefine the possible, and grew up believing that any challenge could be overcome through sufficient application of intelligent stubbornness. The galaxy had learned to love what it had once feared, not because humans had changed, but because the universe had proven that their unique combination of violence and determination was exactly what cosmic civilization needed to survive in a reality that was fundamentally hostile to complex life. In the end, the Terran Protectorate encompassed not just star systems or species, but an entire philosophy of existence. That intelligence coupled with an absolute refusal to surrender could transform any environment, overcome any obstacle, and create beauty in places where only death had existed before. The children of gravity had become the gardeners of infinity, and under their protection the galaxy bloomed with possibilities that had never existed before. When the Void Devourers finally arrived at the Galactic Rim, they encountered something unprecedented in there. Millions of years of cosmic predation. Not a civilization cowering behind inadequate defenses, but a unified galactic community that had learned to thrive in the spaces between stars, to build in the crushing depths of gravity wells, and to fight with the desperate creativity of beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history refusing to die. The war lasted 3 days. On the first day, the Void Devourers deployed reality disruption weapons that had unmade entire galaxy clusters. The attacks struck human defensive networks and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by shield systems that had been designed to function in environments where space-time itself became fluid. On the second day, the extragalactic entities attempted to consume the fundamental forces binding matter together in the Sol system. They discovered that human technology had long since moved beyond conventional matter, utilizing exotic states that existed only under pressures that approached the birth of universes. On the third day, Emperor Admiral Darien Vex 7 led the combined galactic fleet in a counterattack that redefined the meaning of overwhelming force. Human dreadnoughts moved through space-time like living weapons, their crews enduring acceleration that folded reality around them. their weapons systems converting entire star systems into ammunition. The Void Devourers, beings that had considered themselves the apex predators of cosmic space, fled back into the darkness between galaxies, carrying with them the knowledge that they had encountered something even more terrifying than themselves, a species that treated the impossible as merely another problem to solve. In the aftermath, as the galaxy celebrated its survival, Ambassador Nethkul stood once again in a human facility, this time on Earth itself. The planet had been transformed into a living monument to the journey from imprisonment to liberation, its cities now extending deep into the crushing depths of the mantle and high into the radiation-soaked vacuum of space. Was this always inevitable? He asked Director Lyra Vex Alpha, watching human children play in gravitational fields that shifted and flowed like water. Probably not, she replied thoughtfully. But once we survived the first extinction event, once we learned that intelligence plus stubbornness could overcome any environmental challenge, the rest was just a matter of scale. The galaxy had learned to stop fearing humanity's capacity for violence and start appreciating their gift for turning hostile environments into gardens. Under human protection, civilizations that had stagnated for millennia began reaching toward new possibilities, building technologies that incorporated both wisdom and the willingness to take risks that could reshape reality. The Terran Protectorate had become something unprecedented in cosmic history. Not an empire built on conquest, but a community founded on the principle that any challenge could be overcome if you were willing to apply sufficient intelligence and absolutely refuse to accept defeat. And in the end, that was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not just the ability to survive in impossible conditions, but the knowledge that with enough determination and creativity, impossible conditions could become the foundation for something beautiful. The children of Earth had become the shepherds of infinity, and under their watch, the universe itself had learned to bloom. Born in gravity, forged in war, the legacy of Earth's rise to intergalactic dominion.